today. I just thought maybe you can do it or not. If you are feeling good, we can do the interview. Otherwise, even if we are gonna do the interview, I would like to do it like at the end of the class, because my priority should be finishing the at least trigger part today.
Yes, sounds good. Yes, I can do the interview. I wasn't completely able to. Wow.
Sorry about that.
I wasn't able to like finish all the questions and all the slides, but I can still do the interview and see how I'm doing with it. So I can build on that.
Yeah.
Study more later. But I don't want to mess up with our schedule and just postpone it for the next week.
Yeah, we are good. Only thing I'm just trying to finish the triggers today. In that way, I can share the related
Yes,
documentation about the trigger at least.
sure.
Then
We can go with the plan. That sounds
Yeah.
good.
So yesterday, what we did, I think lastly, we were just talking about the recursion of the trigger. Is that correct? 2, 3.
It is correct.
Yeah. So how can we like stop, or how can we break the recursive trigger?
By
think-
creating another class
Okay.
with a
Okay.
Boolean variable.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is there anything else? We discussed a lot about this, so you guys should be remembering some stuff.
So we creating a public class and creating a Boolean variable in it. And on our code, trigger code, we mentioned this Boolean variable. When it became false, then infinite loop breakdown.
Okay, what should be the default value?
The Boolean variable defaultly comes true, and we making it false inside the trigger. That's the easiest way I can explain.
Yeah, that's good. And only one thing I think you forgot, that should be the static, right?
Correct. Didn't I mention?
No, you mentioned it should be Boolean.
I think I mentioned we creating a static method, then
Oh.
create.
Okay, I'm sorry that because I missed that part, I believe. All right, so let's continue from here. Sometimes you are gonna heard about like bulkify or bulky records, just create some bulk records. What do you guys understand when Sanjay used this word?
I understand we are creating or we are downloading or uploading a lot of records at once.
Yes, that's correct. And we are gonna use this bulk determination for when we are doing like more than one. And if you guys remember, whenever Sanjay says we need to create some bulk records, instead of going to the UI side, what we are doing?
We are doing it on anonymous window.
On the anonymous window, yeah. And while creating some bulk records, instead of saying that like creating an object and underneath that inserting only one record. We are creating a list or set or map. It doesn't matter. It should be a collection because it should be something, it can take more than one record. So it should be a collection. We are creating a collection. Then whatever we are doing, we are just inserting that collection. At the end, we are inserting or updating or deleting and that specific collection. So sometimes you are going to hear about the bulkifying the trigger. When they ask you or when somebody is just trying to explain you, if you hear about the bulkifying trigger, you can just think about like this. All the triggers are by default, they are like bulky triggers. Why? Because they can handle one single record, or they can handle like thousands of records. And the only thing you need to remember when we are using like bulkifying trigger, what we can do, we can just you can say manipulate, or we can just handle only one record or thousands of records. Also, we can use the trigger for the data import, mass fraction. When it is mass, it is like a lot of records. Bulk API calls, recursive Apex methods. These are all including more than one records. So if you just count 2 or 3 of them, for example, data import, mass fraction, like bulk API calls, these are going to be enough. And here, while we are using this bulkifying the trigger, we should remember that we need to use a collection for it. And also, we can use some SOQL or DML operations. Why we are doing this? Because, as you all know, we are having some governor limits inside the Salesforce. If we just try to go one by one records, it is gonna be lots of Apex transaction, because when you run one trigger, maybe it is gonna insert thousands of records, but it is just one transaction. Instead of that, if you just insert only one record, that is another transaction. So just because prevent the governor limits, exceeding the governor limits, if we use the collections, SQLs or SOQLs, in Salesforce it is SOQL, and DML operations, we can easily do that. That's why, like, while we are writing down lots of Apex trigger handler class, let me try to find one. That's why we are keep using like for loops. Inside the for loop, we are just creating some SOQLs, and also we are just using lots of collections inside, right? Why we are doing this? Because we need to collect and we need to keep them under the one transaction. That's why we have like queries here while we are writing down the for loops, and also we are creating collections here because we would like to do like a single transaction. Inside the one single transaction, which is update here, but you are updating a list. How many records you have inside? It is up to like here.
So can we say, like, by nature, all triggers are actually bulkifying triggers because we usually use list and update or insert.
Yes, and that is the original purpose of the triggers.
Mhm.
Like instead
Not
of
by doing one by one, right?
yes,
And reach
instead of-
governor limits. Yeah.
yeah, because they have to restrict. That's why there is like governor limits. At the same time, like they need to stay inside that governor limit. Otherwise, like we are gonna keep getting error and error. That's why like the triggers are coming to the picture. And instead of like single records, we can just manipulate more than one records, or you can say thousands of records. Any question on this? When you hear about the like triggers or bulkifying something, remember the collections, because whenever Sanjay says we need to create some bulk records, we are creating the collections inside the anonymous windows, then we are just trying to insert, update, or delete something.
Mehmet Bey, sorry to interrupt, but I think Aslı is trying to join the Zoom.
Is she?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask them. All right. Thank you for notifying us. So, any question on this one? Can I move on?
Good.
You can. Mehmet Bey.
Okay, sounds good. So, we talked about this one before, right? So, we were just checking here, like how many triggers we can write down for a single object. And when we just check this one, if I'm just looking for example, contact, I can see only one trigger here. For the class, I can see like bunch of more than two, but for the trigger, I can see only one. Technically, can I create more than one trigger for one object? Yes, I can create as much as I want to, but there are some like best practices, and best practice says that we should create only one trigger per object. That's why like when we go to any account or anything like opportunity, we have only one. And when we go inside, we have lots of trigger here, but they are underneath the only one trigger, which is related to that object. Inside the class, we can separate them with the methods. In trigger, we can put them underneath each other. We can just delete these comment outs and we can just use them like that. Because this is the best practice. If you are working on the, say, group object, you can just create only one trigger for that group object and you can just use that one. Because this question is a little bit tricky. You can create more than one. Nobody can say anything, but they would like to hear from you guys as like Salesforce developer. If you have like at least some experience, you should be aware of that. Best practice says that it should be this way. If you remember yesterday, I think Aslı was asking the question about the junction object, right? She was saying that, Sanjay, used the term, he said, if there is a two lookup relationship, and in the middle, if you have a junction object, and Aslı said that like it should be like many to many, and the relationship between these three objects, it should be master detail relationship, right? So what did he say? You can technically, you can create a junction object between the lookup relationships, but the best practice says that it should be master detail relationship if it's a junction. So same thing here. Best practice is one trigger per object. Why this is the best practice? Because we talk about the synchronized and asynchronized, right? And we said trigger is asynchronized, which means it's not gonna wait for the response. So you never gonna understand which one is working first. If you have more than one trigger per object, say account object, that way you are not gonna be able to understand which trigger is working or executing first. That is the main reason. That's why this is the best practice. Any questions?
Mehmet Bey, yes, I have a question. We typically do store all the class names and method names and comment them out under the trigger class.
Yeah.
In real life, do we actually
No.
get rid of them or like do the same thing just and use them as like example later on if ever like a situation come across like similar to what we did before?
Normally,
Like, is this normal or are we just like deleting the ones that we used or just
why
like
we are doing this? Because sometimes we are trying to see the limits, and that's why like we are doing like extra examples, and inside that examples, sometimes it is gonna affect like whatever we
Mhm.
did earlier.
before? Yes.
That's why like we are just commenting them out. But in the real life, if you need any trigger and if you write it down, it's gonna stay there.
That
You
should
are
run,
not gonna
right?
comment
Mhm.
that out.
Okay.
But sometimes in the real life, what's happening, for example, once I was working one of the government project, and on that one, there was a requirement, and I was doing some migration with the data loader, and I was keep getting error just because of the trigger they were using. I needed to like split the records from like thousands to 500s. Then I was like splitting until like 50, until 20, until 10 sometimes. And that's not gonna happen if you have like thousands and thousands of records.
Mhm.
So what did I do? I contact with the like Salesforce developer, and I explained the situation. I said, look, your trigger runs perfectly fine. Everything is good, but it is affecting my data load, and it is just causing me like waste of time all the time. Instead of like thousands records together, just because of trigger, I should be able to do it like 10 by 10. And if I do that, we are not gonna catch the deadline. So can you just comment that out, or can you just inactivate your trigger and you can just do it later on? In that specific, she comment them out, or like she asked me to do it. I did by myself, because since I have ability to make it comment out and just get rid of that trigger, but I need to let them know,
Mhm.
because while you are working, every specific detail will be important. And if something happens, because when you do any change inside the Salesforce, it is just gonna put over there as a last modified by Mevlut.
Yes. And it's probably going to affect other
Yes.
people's work
And
too, like in your case.
when something happens, then they are gonna come back to you. They are
Mhm.
gonna say, why did you like comment out this? Or why did you make any change here without like letting us know?
Yes.
Just because of that, you should ask them. And if they know you can do that, in that way, they can just comment out. And the only thing they are just trying to do is when you comment out that trigger, nobody is working related to that trigger.
Mhm.
That's why they were just letting me to do it like at nighttime, especially
I see.
because nobody's working. And I was just trying to comment out, finish my data load. As soon as it is done, just activate it back.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
normally, if you are not going to use any trigger, you should not create it. If you create it, use it.
Thank you.
You're right. Okay, on this one, since you are not familiar with the workflow, but you should know the difference because sometimes they are just opening up the classic questions and they are just asking from there. So at least this is good for understanding the triggers portion also, because some of the stuff we did practice about the triggers, but we didn't talk about like the governor limits and that kind of stuff. So the first one is about the definition. So trigger, it is a Apex code which executes before or after any DML operations. Workflow, it is an automation process tool that can be fired and action based on the evaluation criteria or rule criteria, because there are two criteria over there. In the workflow, you don't need any coding skill. You are just creating, like, think about the flow builder. You are just creating them by clicking, by selecting. That is it. Triggers, you need coding skills. So these are basic stuff you can just easily say without knowing the workflow. Here it says we can access a workflow across the object. Yes. So which means you are selecting one object and you are creating the workflow about that object. In here, we can access the trigger across the object and relate it to that objects. Because what we are doing, when we run that trigger, what's happening? It is affecting the account, and inside the handler class, we are saying we are gonna update some related objects like contact or opportunity, something like that. So you can affect more object on the trigger. But for workflow, whatever object you select, it's just gonna affect that one. Inside the workflow, we cannot perform any DML operation. Only insert and update we can do. If you guys remember, like there was like 4 actions we were talking about the workflow. Is there anyone who remember that?
Is it
Task,
outbound
Creating
message?
a task,
sending email.
outbound
Outbound
message,
message and field
sending email,
updates,
and
maybe?
field update, right? So only thing we can use like update, field update, and creating a task, maybe it's just like an insert. But normally we cannot use the other DML operations. Inside the trigger, more than 15 DML operations can be used in a single trigger. If you just think about like the DML operations, you can use like DML class, which has like 7, 8 operations like database.insert, database.update, database.delete, database.undelete. And you have like normal DML operations, insert, update, and you can use these are for the after or before. So you can go up to 15 DML operations in a single trigger. We cannot do any query from the database, which is SOQL, inside the workflow. But inside the trigger, we can just create and we can use like 20 SOQLs in a single trigger. That's what we were doing here. So these are the differences. Oops, I took the wrong one. Any question on this? This is something new for you guys, but if you know the definition of the workflow, and if you remember that for actions, you are gonna be okay while you are like comparing with the other automation tools or triggers. There is no coding required. It is just related to the specific object. You cannot perform the DML operations except the insert and update. You cannot do any SOQL queries. In the trigger, you can use the SOQL queries up to 20, DML operations up to 15, and it is related to that object. Maybe it is more than that. It's gonna affect more than one object, I can say, if it is related. And coding skills to do triggers. Any question?
I'm good.
Not for me.
All right. I think Aslı was be able to join, right? Okay. So since everything has some limitation, workflows has some limitations also, but is there anything like overcome by the triggers in Salesforce? Workflows are not be able to create or update a separate object. Inside the workflow, you cannot do that. You cannot reference any certain fields when you are using the workflows. You cannot get a reference. You will not have your workflow doing like no more than just field updates and sending emails. But in trigger, you have more than these. Basically, if you know this difference, you are gonna cover that. And I suggest you guys, like, if you see anything like this, like any graphic which is comparing two different things, just cut it out and paste it somewhere. Because when they ask you a single question, like comparing triggers and workflows, they are evaluating your triggers knowledge and workflow knowledge. That's why they prefer to ask, like, what is the difference between them? Difference between validation rules and triggers. So what you can say without knowing anything, like, because you guys know the validation rules, what are they look like, and triggers, what are they look like. Are we writing down any code for the validation rules?
No.
No.
What we were doing is just come here, go to the object, and write down an validation rule. So if I say new here, and if I give a name here, I don't know, something, I want you guys to give me the instructions. In that way, I can choose a field and I can limit that field. Like the value should be in between 1 and 9, nothing else. Say we are talking about the phone number.
For which object?
For account object, I'm under the account object. At the
Okay.
same time, I'm just trying to check what kind of field is the phone number here. Account phone, it is just a phone, so okay. We can use like numbers only. Okay, can you guys make me to write?
I think we need to start with the field, insert field, like which field we're gonna put our validation on,
Yeah,
and
whatever
that
we
would be
are,
phone.
whatever we are writing here, is it like a coding skill or not?
It's just gonna be a formula.
Yes. So what we need to do is we need to select the function, just select the fields and put the operators inside and create a formula. If we are just talking about like it should be in between 1 and 9, we are not counting 0 here. How can I write this one down?
So let's say insert field and decide the field first. That's gonna be a phone number. Click it under the account. Let's find out the phone number.
I think it was account phone,
So
something.
let's click the account number. I saw the phone.
I think it was just phone.
Just phone, okay.
Yeah. Insert it. Then now we are trying to restrict the details.
Yeah,
Let's put less than
Then
and less than or equal or less than, whichever gonna match. I think there is, yes, less than or equal 9, but there is another operator over there, less than or equal. I think it's at the same time. That could be give us a error. That's what I thought. Let's try like that. Maybe it will work. It's giving error. Let's delete the.
just think about like this. I'm not trying to judge your knowledge about creating the formula. I am just trying to see if you guys remember like what we need to write down here. I'm changing the formula. The number should be like
if
below the 9 only.
Correct.
So we should
how can we write down?
maybe
And we would like
write
to
a
add
function.
and condition. If you are
Yeah,
just gonna
we can-
if you are gonna just use the the smaller than we could decide 10 because it's not gonna include the 10.
Okay.
Let's say 10. Let's put a space.
Okay.
And by the way, the check syntax says syntax says it should be on the text condition, we would like to put in curly braces. Pardon me, what was the name? The single bracket. Yeah. So let's cover
I
the
think-
10 between single bracket.
I think this is just expected text receipt number. So I think we should choose another field like which is having a text or something, because that field is not the perfect one, I can say.
How about we need to do that?
But this is about the data type. So if we didn't take the, like, for example, which we did an example for another object, right? I believe we did something for the review object. And what we did was about the rating field. I
It
don't
was 1 to
remember.
5, I think, something like that.
Yeah, so I don't know what was the like data type over there. But I'm just checking now. Rating was the number,
Mm.
which is double. Okay, so while we are trying to write down something, okay, this is the one, but I would like to write another one. Like we talk, just give a name and just make sure rating field is like, it's supposed to be smaller than 10. If it is not smaller than 10, it should be give me an error.
So can we do rating smaller or equal or just smaller 10?
Yeah, just make it smaller than 10.
And then we are gonna write the syntax is true.
Yeah, syntax is true. Okay. So I'm just gonna save this one. And for the error message, I can just say it should be less than 10. I just put down like this. So is everything fine here? Can I save it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to,
But we should do like -1, -2, maybe we should put some between.
just give me a second. I'm just gonna deactivate the other one. Okay, so we have this one active only. This one. And it says that the number should be less than 10, right? So when we try this, is it gonna work? I need to go to the review object. And I'm just trying to create a new one. I don't know, the job application say 10. And for the rating, I need to put something less than 10, right? 9. Am I gonna get an error?
No,
Why? Because you tried?
no, we put.
It is
So-
covering 9 also, maybe.
I'm sorry?
The formula covering number 9, maybe.
It should be less than 10. So
Did
I
it have
thought it
like
The
the
number, the
decimal
number,
points or something?
the number what we are
Data.
putting here, it should be less than 10, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it should be less than 9. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's calculating other ratings and then passing the 10. That's why it's given as that kind of feedback.
No, like,
Is it
did
our
we say
rating
anything like
data
that
type
in
is
our
different?
formula?
But I tried to say
Maybe
if the
0.00? I don't know.
If I try another number like 5,
Can you try 5.00? I don't know, maybe it was like originally something like that. No, okay.
could
What
you
about-
please go to record for me? I just
What
would like to see previous reviews on it.
oh, okay. But we changed the formula, like we changed the validation.
So
rule.
the rating has 2. If you can add 7, it should be accepted.
Do you think so?
Probably.
Any other suggestion? I don't want to spend too much time on this. I am just trying to make you guys remember about something validation rules.
I'm thinking, I'm not sure, but when we create this rating field, the data type is not exactly matching and making sense with the formula we created on the validation rule.
No, because there is no difference between 7.0 and 7. The thing is here, this one looks everything correct, right? But if I just say this one is like this, it is gonna accept it. Do you guys agree with me? And if I just refresh this, and if I give 7 here,
How
this-
about you write 11?
okay, let's see that. Do you think it is gonna accept it?
No, but just
Because the logic is different
Mhm,
here. If you
it's
guys remember why
opposite logic.
what we-
Yeah.
Yes. In here, in the formula, we were just putting here what is false, like what if this one true here, it should throw me an error. So if this formula expression is true, display an error message. So if I would like to stay less than 10, I should put something bigger than 10.
So we are writing a formula for condition where we get an error.
Yes,
Okay, that's completely opposite logic.
that is the complete opposite logic.
Mhm.
That's why, like, just a reminder, and this is the most common thing usually get and forget. This condition should give you the error inside this box, whatever is the formula. I'm not trying to create a complex formula. I'm just reviewing this.
Okay, now it makes a lot of sense. When I was taking the app builder exam, there were a lot of formula field questions.
Oh,
And I had a lot of difficulty because none of the answers made sense to me. And now I realize that
Yeah.
because they were like opposite logic.
yeah. For
And I
example,
was just like making things up, just like
in here,
clicking.
in here, this is the like formula of what we created, right? We were just looking for it must be between 1 and 5. What did we write down here is rating is less than 1 or rating is higher than 5. if this one is true, it is gonna give me an error like this. Or if this one is true, it is gonna give me an error like this. That is why we will be able to keep this rating like in between 1 and 5. If I just try to 8 right now, it was original value was, I think, 2. So where did we come here? From here, right? So validation rules, it is easy and you are not writing any code, but for the triggers, you need some development skills to write a code because trigger is about the coding. Even if you don't remember the first one, you should be able to say that. Because you are comparing something with the like automation on the admin side, which doesn't require any coding skill, and this one requires coding skills. Triggers can be used for various different things and can be executed different times when initiating any new records or saving or deleting, which is like basically DML operations. Validation rules are used to confirm that the data entered into the record meet the various data quality and business rules before letting the user save it. So what we can say on the validation rule, we are just trying to do that. The data which is trying to get into the database, it should be meeting our data quality or whatever is the business requirement. If the business requirement says that that rating should be in between 1 and 5, we are just creating a formula to all the data which is trying to enter to the OR. It is giving the same data quality for us. If it is out of 1 and 5, which means that data is not qualified for our business requirement.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I remember a question in the App Builder exam questions that we studied. It was something like this. Like if there was a validation rule for an industry field not to be like changed to like some sort of a limitation on the number of the letters, and a trigger is written and it's updating the industry fields to technology, which is above the letter limitations that validation rules suggests. So trigger actually overrides the validation rule and the field is updated and saved as technology. Did I understood it correctly? So triggers override the validation rules?
As an experience, I didn't have an experience like that, but while we are writing the code in Salesforce, whenever we cannot complete some stuff on the admin portion, right? So if you have a validation rule and according to that validation rule, nobody can put that thing over there, but you can do some stuff on the back end while you are writing the code and you can bypass some stuff. But I'm not sure if trigger is overriding the validation rule.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that question and I was thinking, interesting information. Like I had no idea.
Because like if you think like this, if you keep that validation rule active over there, you cannot create, or even if you create another validation rule and saying the opposite, whatever the first validation rule says, it's not going to work. But by the backend, you are gonna be able to do that.
Mhm. Okay.
Any question on this? I got it as a no. So what is the difference between process builder and trigger? Process builder, it is just a customization. You are doing everything. This is one of the other automation tool on the admin portion. There is no code required because it is about the logic and record to complete and fulfill the requirement. If we are using the process builder, it will take less time to complete the requirement because writing down a coding, sometimes it's taking more than that. So basically the differences are like, depends upon like, there's no code required, taking less time if you are using automation tools instead of like Apex coding or trigger. And whatever the tool you are using for the automation tool in the admin side, they are about the customization because you are not writing down anything. Can I go?
Yes.
This is the last one. This is the best practices. I want you guys to memorize this. This is not only for. It is starting with write down one trigger per object. Just think this is the golden rule. That's why like we were just keep writing down inside the same trigger again and again for that account trigger or for that contact trigger. One trigger per object. This is number one. You don't need to like memorize this thing, but if you receive a question like this is a really like good question for the interviewer and also understanding the experience, whatever you have. Because you should be able to count all this stuff. Number one, golden rule, one trigger per object. This is what the best practice says. So logic less triggers. What does it mean? If you write methods in your trigger, those cannot be exposed for test purposes. You also cannot expose logic to be reused anywhere else in your org. So just say less logic. Context specific handler methods. Using specific methods in your trigger handler class to keep your code clean and scalable. Just remember, whenever we are writing down a trigger, we are writing down a handler class, right? Whatever is the trigger, if it is an opportunity trigger, we are having an opportunity trigger handler class. Why we are doing that? Inside that, we are just specifying some methods to make our code clean and scalable. The only thing from the trigger side, we are just calling that method. 4, we need to bulkify our code, which means all the triggers are bulkified, so no need to worry about it. Bulkifying, it is just doing that more than one single record. We are just manipulating a bunch of records, sometimes thousands of records. One trigger per object, less logic, and use a handler methods, or you can just say we need to create a handler class and we can just go method by method to make it clean coding. Bulkify your code. It says avoid SOQL queries or DML statements inside for loops. Why it says that? Because an individual Apex request gets a maximum of 100 SOQL queries before exceeding the governor limits, which means governor limits for the SOQL queries is maximum 100 SOQL query. Since we were writing down some SOQL queries, but we are not having that much like queries while we are doing some examples. Maximum 100 SOQL query, it is the governor limit. So if this trigger is invoked by a batch, you are gonna see the batch classes of more than 100 accounts records, the governor limit will throw a runtime exception. Because when it says batch, which means it is having like bunch of records inside, and if you are having like batch of 200 records, and if you are having like 100 batches, it is gonna make 100 times 100. You guys are gonna learn. I don't wanna go through details about the batch classes. Just try to avoid like you using the SOQL queries inside the for loop. Like whenever we write down any code, let me go through here. Only a few times we write down some queries, I believe, inside the for loop. One of them, inside the for loop, sometimes we are just putting the queries here, right? I couldn't find it. Otherwise, we are just creating that SOQL queries outside of that for loop. Yeah, this one. Using collections, you can just say, because whenever we write down any trigger, we use the collection. It doesn't matter if it is a map, if it is a like list or set, we need to use them because of this governor limit issue. Querying large data sets, there are some limitations. I'm gonna share this governor limits also because sometimes they are just asking straightly like, what are the governor limits in Salesforce? This question is kind of crazy because there are lots of governor limits, and what are they asking exactly, like which is related to what? If they are asking for the like SOQL queries, maximum SOQL query amount is 100. The total number of records that can be returned by SOQL queries in a request is 50,000. So in this one, you can say governor limit for the SOQL queries in a one call, in a one SOQL query, you can collect up to 50,000 records. If returning a large set of queries, it is gonna exceed your heap limit, then SOQL query for loop must be used instead. If you are trying to like get, when you write down the SOQL query, if you are expecting the return of that SOQL query will be more than 50,000, it says instead of doing that, just write down your SQL query inside your for loop. Normally, it is not suggesting that, but if you are just querying large data set, just use the SQL query inside your for loop. Any question here? This is kind of different. Until
Okay.
now, we didn't talk about like the governor limits.
It sounds like this governor limit is different per different functions.
Yes.
Because I think it was a different number for record creation, right?
Yes. Yes, that's
What
correct.
was that number? Do you remember?
500 for the
I can ask you that one on the internet.
Oh, that's why I'm asking you, trying to figure out.
Yeah,
500
for
for
the
the
for the
500, okay.
custom fields creation in a single object, if you are using a professional edition,
100.
it is 100. If you are using the unlimited edition, it is 500.
500. Okay, yes. Got it. I remember it now. Thank you.
You're welcome. So that one shows that I'm not going to use that question. All right. So we need to use add feature method. This is something new. It's critical to write your Apex code to efficiently handle bulk or many records at a time. This is also true for asynchronous Apex methods, those annotated with the feature keyword. There are some like feature keywords you are using while you are writing down any Apex methods. The differences between synchronous and asynchronous Apex can be found. It says, so if there is a feature method, I should say, in the Apex code, you should use the feature or while you are writing the trigger. It says, this is the thing I always do the mistake on this. Sometimes I copy the profile ID straight and just putting over there, if you guys remember on the couple of examples.
Yes.
Because it says avoid to hard coding for the IDs. Because if you just copy and paste it over there, that is static something. And like if you want your code is more efficient, it should be dynamic. Just avoid the static values, especially for the IDs. Use a framework, like it will make your code the best practices for the better testing and scalability, and it's gonna make it clean. Most of the time testers are using, because developers are using some frameworks, which means you have some boundaries, like think about like this, and you are just trying to stay inside. When you stay inside, if you don't exit that, your like code will be clean and it is gonna obey the rules for the best practices. So using the framework is that one. Okay, so we have like 10 things to memorize about best practices for the trigger. Okay, I couldn't find to say another word for that. Maybe while you are just taking a note, you can just put the like titles here, or if you are getting hard time to understand what it says on the like subject, then you can just put a few keywords underneath it, but you should have this list to memorize. If you have what to do list, just add this one over there. what is the difference between database.insert and insert? I think you guys know the answer for this. Do you?
Yes, kind of. So
Yeah.
database let us to partially execute the code, even though some required fields are missing or some of the code is have errors. Still, the working portion can be implemented. Versus with the insert operation, if there is an error, it's not going to work like altogether.
That's perfect. That's all you need to say. Like, since it was asking, especially for the insert operation here, they can ask you like, what is the difference between database class and like DML operations? It is the same thing. You can just start with an example. You can just say, if we just take an example as a like insert operation or update operation, if we are just trying to insert like 10 records together, but some of the records, we forget to put the required fields inside, and they should throw an error, like 5 of them normally. But if we are using database class, and if we are gonna say at the end database dot insert, then that 5 records, even if they fail, the other 5 will be inserted, which is like, which is saying that we can just partially do our insert operation. This is only possible with the database dot insert. And if they ask you to like how we can do that, I mention once more about this. I don't remember which example was it, but let me find it from here. Database. So this value should be false here. Like this is one of the other thing. It is a standard something. As a default, this value should be false here. Otherwise, it is not gonna be any difference between database.insert and insert operation. If this one is true, there is no difference. No need to write down all this stuff here, because it's gonna be the same thing with the insert only. If it is just insert only, and if I have any error for like 5 records, just because of that 5 records, I'm not gonna be able to insert the other 5 records, which they don't have any problem to be inserted. Because of the insert operation, I'm not gonna be able to do that. That's why this is the one you should know the structure or syntax. Just memorize it. Add to your bucket to memorize it. Or just take a note. Because at the end of the question, if you explain everything about the difference here, and if they ask you like, what is the syntax for it? If you cannot answer it, it's not gonna work. So I should add this one here, and I should emphasize this one.
So we are expected to actually say word to word this code or explain the logic of it with our own words.
If they ask you, then you need to.
Okay.
If they don't ask you, if they are just looking for the like differences in between them and nobody is asking you about the syntax, no need to worry about this.
Okay.
But I suggest you to like make this one memorized. And you can just memorize like this. You can just change here, but no need. database.save result. That's why it is SR list. It is a list because this is the array equal to database.insert. Then this can be
change.
changed, but this is the important part. This should be false.
It's almost like transferring to language, like even though the list, there are things false in the list, still added to the like a SR list or
Yes,
something.
I think that is a good determination. Like even list has some false values, do the insert operation.
Mhm.
To where? To here.
Yes.
I'm just like going through one by one, and I'm just
Oh, Melih
trying
Bey,
to add
it's
as much as I can.
7:43. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I didn't notice it's 7:43.
Oh yeah, you just noticed it, or you noticed like 15 minutes
I,
before?
I
and
was
you didn't have
ignoring.
it?
No, I just noticed that if you
All
want to
right,
do it on
that's
Monday,
fine.
you can do
It's
it.
fine. We at least we can finish this one, and we can do it on Monday. No worries.
Okay.
All right. This is the difference. Partial insert is not supported here for the insert. Rollback, these are like the terminologies. Rollback is not supported on the insert operation. Rollback means like there is no other option. It is white or black. It's gonna accept or it's gonna like decline it. There is no rollback. But in here, rollback is supported means you can partially insert like 5 of the records. The other 5, they can roll back. And these are the explanation only. I just insert an example here, what I was talking, like if you are having, and if you are just inserting 10 records, 5 of them having all the required fields, and remaining 5 records missing some required field values, right? If you try with the insert, you are not gonna be able to, you are gonna get an error. If you are just using database.insert, the other 5 will be come back to you, but the other 5 will be inserted at least. Ooh, this is the long one. I want you guys to, I don't know how, but I was be able to memorize this one. There are like 21 steps. This is the full cycle of your trigger, like order of execution. You can hear this phrase a lot. Order of execution in triggers. So since we write down like until now 40 something triggers, each and every trigger works like this on the back end. So what is this? You can just cut this one and paste it somewhere, like just in front of you, and check, try to memorize only these steps. And if you don't remember what does it mean, like system validation, or what does it like save no commits, then the next steps you are gonna see, these are, it is explaining the details. So you have like 20, 21 steps. I think I merged one of them together. That's why it's showing 20 over there. So the first step, load or initialize the record. If you remember, we were just initializing, assigning, declaration about the records. This is the first step, initialize the record. It loads the original record from the database or initialize the record for an absurd statement. just say initialize the record. No need to go further than that. The second one, it is the system validations. Okay, this one, you are trying to load a record, right? Just think about like this is gonna do the insert. New record field values from the request and overwrites the old values. If you are doing any update, it's just gonna overwrite the old values. If the request came from a standard UI edit page, Salesforce run the system validations to check the record for what? Like if it is complying with the layout specific rules or layout and field definition level, is there any requirement? Valid field formats, is it matching with the field formats? For example, if it is a like number field and you are just trying to put some letters inside, it is checking all this stuff on the behind of the scene, and maximum length of the field. So if they ask you when you explain all this thing, which I don't think so, because when they ask you the order of execution, it is a lot you need to talk about. From inside, if they ask you, like, can you explain me, like, what is the system validations? In that way, you can just count, like, these blue ones. Because sometimes they know this is a long question and long answer you should give them. Instead of that, they say, you know, you are aware of the like order of execution in trigger, right? Of course, you say, yes, I know. And then they are just picking one of the steps and they want you to explain them. This is another like good question to understand the experience of interviewer or who is getting the interview. So for the system validation, you can just say on the background, Salesforce checks some stuff like if that value is like complying with the maximum length, if it is matching with the field formats, and like, is there any layout specific rules, or is there any like required values for the layout or field definition level? Even if you just count 2 or 3 of them, they are gonna say, okay. Because this is too much deep question. And while you are studying or memorizing this thing, if you go like step by step like this, it is gonna make more sense. What did you write until now? Like 40 triggers. We are spending so much time sometimes to write one trigger, but believe me, it is spending a lot of like steps behind of the scene. When the request comes from another source, such as an Apex application or SOAP API call, Salesforce validates only the foreign keys, which is external IDs. Before executing a trigger, Salesforce verifies that any custom foreign keys do not refer to the object itself. Salesforce runs custom validation rules if multi-line items were created, such as quote line items, opportunity line items. You don't need to go much details, but just say at least 2-3 of this one. You can just mention about the foreign key if this call is coming from outside somewhere. All right, third step, before trigger. So if we check here, this is the one where we were talking about like before and after. When we say before should be used before that record saved to the database. This is the one. But saving a record to the database and committing that, it is totally different things. It is saving, but it is not committing on the step 6. If we need to change anything previous, like before this step 6, it is gonna be before trigger. If something after this one, right after this saving, it is gonna turn to the after trigger. I believe now it makes more sense. Or is there anyone who is listening me over there?
Yes.
Yes.
We are
I have a question. What is that image in the middle of the page?
This
The
one?
diagram? Yes. I
don't
don't
know.
understand what is that.
I don't know. And when you say, I just noticed it.
It it looks strange. I couldn't figure it out what it is.
Yeah,
But yeah, okay.
it was inside this picture. I just
Okay, I
Yes.
thought you created it. Okay.
No, it's not my creation. So this thing here, it is so much important for us to describe
And
or determine if it is before or after.
where is 11 here?
I think they skip it.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is the only picture I found, and while I was studying for the interviews also, I was just using this one because I can see everything together because it's a lot, and at least I can try to draw this line on my mind because it is going like awkward. So if it can go back or it can just continue. But first thing is this, second thing is validation rules, third thing is before trigger. And then it says custom validations. If you just back here, if I go to the mouse, what it says here, Salesforce run the custom validation rules if multi-line items were created, such as code line items or opportunity line items. So it doesn't mean each and every time it is just looking this, but if it is applicable, it is just checking the custom validations also. So system validations first, custom validations after the before trigger. Then, if you guys remember, we were applying some like duplication rules and matching rules, that kind of stuff. They are here just before saving the record. Until you save the record, you can check the duplication rules. So this is another step. They are doing that for each and every record. So if I ask you guys to tell me like first 5 steps, let's see who has a good short-term memory.
Not me.
Like first 5 steps coming from the
Just-
same person. I can tell the first step, insert.
Okay. First one is initializing, right?
Oh, okay.
Initializing the-
I wasn't the one right. Okay.
yeah, initializing the input or record. The second one, system validations. Third one,
Before triggers.
before trigger. After the before trigger, after the system validations, what is it? Custom validation.
Custom.
After the custom validations,
Duplicate rules.
duplicate rules. Sixth one, we said 6 is the important step, which is
Save, not commit.
saving to the database, but not committing it. So we got the 6 steps already. I can finish if you want like this, but it's gonna be like only 3 minutes left. So let's continue. After saving it, the thing is after trigger, because this is our like very important line. After this one, it is just turning to the after trigger. After the trigger, you have assignment rules. They need to check. After the assignment rules, they need to check the auto response rules. You can check the details about these are. It is all written. If it is not here, it should be somewhere. And then workflow action. If there is a workflow, they are gonna be done here. Then you can say it is checking the system validations before trigger, save and no commit, and after trigger. If you remember this, these are the same steps here. So
it's double checking over there?
it is double checking before the updating any record. Because while you are updating, what are you doing? Basically, like you are changing a record, but you are inserting that, right? At the end, when you complete your change, you are just inserting again. So it is just checking some steps again. After updating the record, it process and checking the flows. These are the flows, what we were doing. And inside your flow, if you are just inserting something, just checking again. If there is a escalation rules, they are gonna check. Entitlement rules, they need to check. If there is a like parent to child relationship, and if it has a roll-up summary fields, they need to check. If there is a grandparent, like which means there is a child, maybe that child is parent of another object, in that way, say account here, I'm just giving an example, supposed to be like that way. So say this is parent as an account object, and you have a child, say contact object, and you have another thing, say, I don't know, like the position object. So this is gonna turn to, if they all have the master detail relationship, this is gonna be the grandparent at that time. Grandparent of position object. If there is a roll-up in between these two, this is still parent's parent, and it is getting some values from the grandchild. It is checking that one also. When you think like this, behind of the scene, Salesforce works more than us, right?
In here, in after 14, process and flows, then if it fail, is it fails, or if it's checking again, it goes to number 2?
I think it depends. Like if you are inserting something, it is just checking again.
But it is updated.
But it is not about failing some stuff.
Because I think the picture just reminds me it failed, and we are like in a loop, kind of. I don't know, because it's the, the
I don't
walking
know
stairs.
why did they like make it like this, but it could be
I
because
thought
he's stuck somewhere like in between, right?
I thought like it's like walking stairs going up, but the people are going down, so they're not moving anywhere. They're just staying.
Yeah, you are right. When I just zoom in, I can say that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it just reminds me then we are in a loop, kind of, so we are like kind of failing.
Maybe
Yeah.
it is picture of recursion.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, now everything makes sense, right? Okay, if there is a criteria based in sharing, like we have the sharing rules, we can share according to sharing rules, we can share the records with, according to the owner, or based on the criteria. If we have any criteria sharing rule, then it's checking that one. And database commitment is right here. Like we said, it is not committing here. Line number 6, right here. It is just committing to the database on here at the end, very end. And after the commitment logic, you can say.
And
But-
these are just takes a couple seconds, right?
Couple milliseconds,
Yeah.
seconds, yes. That is the power of the automation, otherwise. So I already inserted here, at least we completed this one, and I'm gonna share this trigger stuff here after I delete this. Do you guys have any question? So
I
until
think I'm good.
No.
we covered like 217 questions, you can say, if we count each page as a one question. This is including the admin portion also.
In the last portion we covered, to me, it's like deep into the
Was-
technical
it was-
interview,
Yes, yes.
right? Like this is like, it wouldn't get any
Because
worse than this,
I
right?
I can say if I am the interviewer, I can ask this one 100% because this is measuring lots of stuff. And because if they don't like talk about the triggers and everything, if they just ask you what are the system validations, if you just count like 2 or 3 things from there, like saying that Salesforce checks the length of the like record, and it needs to check the format of that field, and like that. These are like the system validations. Each and every time it does that. And if you are trying to add multi-line records, then they need to apply the custom validations. It looks like complicated, but if you go like step by step, like we did, it's gonna make more sense, and you are gonna be able to like understand this stuff. I think Sanjay is here. So thank you so much, guys,
Thank
Okay.
you.
bearing with me until this point. And
Recording stopped.